Okay, we're going to try this again. I'm going to apologise for that. That was foolish of me. Some people seem to like that I'm streaming, but I don't know why, because they just listen to me talk for 20 minutes with nothing happening. And now I have to do this again. So here we go. And no preamble this time. Last time I had a preamble where I talked about how nice it was to be here and the work that I was doing, but who gives a fuck about that? Because I just wasted 20 minutes of my time not paying attention to the two people that commented saying I'm muted because I didn't know what they meant. I thought the first person who said muted was saying it sardonically as a means of saying I have you your broadcast on right now, but I've deliberately muted you in order to not listen to you, which I thought was funny. Obviously I was wrong, and please now tell me, somebody, for the love of God, please tell me if I am actually audible or not. I think I am, but who cares? We're talking about this anyway. It's breaking the law is the law. This is a presentation I gave last year at the International Society for Metal Music Studies, ISMS, 2025 Biennial Conference in Seville, in Spain. It was very good. And this was nicely received, really encouraging, to be honest, because about a month and a half later, I submitted my thesis. So it was really nice to get the reception that I got. People were really interested in the paper because it is so much the centre of my thesis. It's basically a sort of elaboration on my introduction. And so let's get into it. What is going on here? Please, somebody get in the chat and tell me whether they can hear me. But what am I supposed to do? There's no point. I mean, if I hold on, let me see if I can find out. The thing is, why am I even embarrassed? Who cares? Who cares? None of you are going to watch this anyway. If you are watching this anyway, well, foolish. So, we know metal is about death, yeah, maybe. We know maybe it's about rebellion, authority. It's about things which shock and startle, perhaps. This is not uncommon, an assertion. And indeed, classic metal scholars will say, it's about scandalous transgression. This was originally from the early 90s. And when Walser was writing, these were the things that were happening in metal a lot. You had fire, death, blood, upside down crosses, maybe other things were upside down, trident as well. We've got pre-modern antiquity being referenced. We've got all kinds of sort of violence and terror and religious symbolism, mythic symbolism, all these things that are considered taboo are all finding their place in metal in various ways. And this made a lot of sense to how we understood metal in its early decades, where metal was conceived of as a kind of a resistance against various things, maybe. There was real moral sort of pushback against metal from in the West, from conservatives, also from liberals. People were concerned that maybe metal music was dangerous, that it was morally deleterious, and obviously metal bands and journalists and then scholars all kind of lent into this idea in various ways. I do wonder sometimes whether we could accuse metal musicians or metal journalists of somewhat, if metal journalists are hyping up what metal bands are saying, maybe metal scholars in turn were also hyping up what metal journalists were saying to some extent, Maybe there's a bit of a puff piece happening here, indeed. Oh, great, people can hear that I'm saying things. That's fantastic, thank you very much. So, and that's all very well, but whereas in the 90s we had Cradle of Filth with their classic Jesus is a cunt t-shirts, In the 2020s, we have the Jesus Probably Isn't That Bad t-shirt courtesy of Raised by Owls, the comedy grindcore band. The procession between one and the other really shows us the development of metal over the past 20 years. And it's a passage from transgression to something which seems a little bit more domesticated, maybe even the word normalised could be applied. That metal has become, more socially acceptable in some ways, and maybe this has occurred through different means. Maybe we're going to explore what those means are, but certainly the stark contrast between something that is so directly taboo or offensive or controversial, shocking, to something which is not only a fairly tepid statement on the the level of its enunciation. It's even-handing, even as it's being said, with the word probably, and then you've got the kind of double negation of isn't that bad, but also what it means semantically. This is not taboo, it's not arguing anti-religiously, it's not making a statement that's misanthropic or violent. It's actually kind of nice, and even he's got a cute ice cream in his hand, because which English person who has, even the ones who don't have lactose tolerance, even the lactose intolerant, they all have ice cream famously, don't they? So what we're talking about here are two kind of strategies for understanding metal, to understanding this procession from one to the other, from normalisation, from a transgressive metal, from a shocking metal culture to something that's more domesticated. But also I want to point out that this process began a long time before the kind of things that I'm going to elaborate a bit later on in the presentation, which are much more recent, and this shirt is much more recent. But this process kind of started a long time before that. And the two ways in which it kind of operated, I'm going to suggest, are one involved sort of parody and sort of undermining the sort of seriousness of metal's aesthetics and the transgressive symbols that it uses to produce something which is easier to approach, and that was first done actually by Rick Mail and Adrian Edmonds, I believe, the guys who did Young Ones and then later Bottom. They had one of their earlier bits was called a metal band called Bad News, which was on BBC, but it wasn't as successful or well known as Spinal Tap, which was obviously a feature film, but they were made right around the same time in the early to mid 80s. And this starts the process of metal eventually becoming something that is a figure of fun. Obviously, you could point to major milestones along the way, like the Osbourne show, perhaps the Brutal Legend video game or Guitar Hero might have played into this in some ways as well. And eventually the litany of horrors that I'm going to show you. On the other hand, we have the legitimating approach to metal, to making it more acceptable. And this involves, rather than undermining, this is establishing metal music as culturally significant or worthy, deemed legitimate, deemed important. And that's represented here by Thin Lizzy singer Dee Snider, who is at the PMRC, the Parent Music Research Council, Senate hearings in 1985. He is sitting in front of Al Gore's wife Tipper and her friends from both Democrat and Republican parties, who all agreed that this metal and hip-hop music was really getting a bit much, and don't they need to calm it down with the Satanism / talking about racial politics in a way which offended white America. Dee Snider obviously not talking about racial politics particularly, but he spoke eloquently on the day, and this moment has been considered an important part in metal's kind of becoming more legitimate, being taken more seriously. And here's another kind of early pivot point, which is in 1986, Metallica released Master of Puppets, very successful album, very critically acclaimed album. And Rolling Stone, which is the quote below, chose, rather than dismissing metal as they had for years and years prior, decided that a point had been tipped and that they were going to endorse Metallica. But the way in which they endorse Metallica is by saying that all of the stuff that they think is embarrassing is not there. All the things that they would denigrate metal for are missing on Master of Puppets, according to them. And this allows them to present Metallica as a much more serious, legitimate kind of metal that is open for listening by proper music aficionados, not just teenagers who like sort of sexism and fantasies and stupid music, which was the portrayal of metal by journalists up to this point. Now I want to point out that early era of denigrating metal critically only really lasts up until this point, until the kind of mid to late 80s. And after that, there's a sort of critical mass of rock and metal magazines to provide a counterbalance, but also metal just stops being as critically denigrated after this time. Certainly once extreme metal, and certainly when you have this kind of transition point where you've got things which are harder than traditional heavy metal, but are also doing very well commercially. Oh, I've just realised actually. Oh, there you go. Hold on. Yeah, I can show you the actual quote now. Sorry about that. But when you've got this kind of mix of more extreme aesthetics and commercial success, after that point it becomes harder and harder for the critics to say that metal is completely valueless because of moments like this, effectively. I'll come back now. And here are some books which also participate in this process of legitimation. I'm saying metal studies is integrally involved in this. And all of these books, which are all classics from our field of metal music studies, all of these serve to legitimate metal in different ways. Some of them are more focused, like Harris Berger's book over here, are much more focused on the music, or so is Robert Walser. They're both very much thinking about, well, what are the contributions that metal music offers specifically? What's the value there? Dina Weinstein, Donna Gaines, thinking more about the cultural side of things, or maybe the social end of things. What does metal offer its people? What are the currents or ideas that are being tapped into by metal fans and musicians? What's going on there as a broader phenomenon? And then Keith Cohen-Harris, who was one of my PhD supervisors, focused in on extreme metal and brought this even more to the fore, saying, even the most taboo parts of metal, they are worthy of exploration and understanding, even the things that are the most disgusting, the most violent, etc., etc., etc. Even the murderers need to be examined. Important stuff. But eventually you end up getting to moments like this. Here is Gojira, France's basically most successful rock band in our time. And they are playing at the Olympics 2 years ago. They played at the Olympic opening ceremony, and that's the Bastille. And they played a song that had double kick drum and scream vocals, and apart from blast beats, it had most of the things you consider to be pretty heavy about metal. And they had the accompanying visuals. You can see there was fire, there was blood, there was a mock execution. Marie Antoinette's severed head was being lifted up at one point, as far as I remember. And this is really important because this has never happened before. We've never had metal represent an internationally significant cultural event like this before. There was another example. In 2022, Ozzy Osbourne appeared at the Commonwealth Games closing ceremony in Birmingham. But you could maybe explain that away as, well, it's in Birmingham, and how many famous musicians are from Birmingham, and metal had already been getting more associated with Birmingham over the past 15 years, something that other scholarship, including my own, has touched on occasionally. But this is different. This is and if you'll pardon my language, this is the fucking Olympics. You know, this is an international event that is seen by literally everyone. This isn't the Commonwealth Games, which is a sort of, you know, it's nice, but it's easily regarded as a sort of indulgence on the part of the United Kingdom. The Olympics has the pretense of internationalism. So to see metal representing France at this level of cultural display was really interesting. And this isn't the first kind of event of that kind of interest or significance either. Here's another one. Here's Bill Bailey, a comedian from Britain, well known for doing jokes about metal and being a pretty good musician himself, an excellent musician even. And he did a death metal song in one of his routines called Ripped Apart by Badgers, which is metal that supposedly comes from the West Country. He's from around here, where I'm sitting right now. I currently live in Bristol. Bill is from the Bath, sort of North Somerset area. And here he is dancing with the horns extended, with lightning in the background, on an episode of Strictly Come Dancing. This is actually the semi-final, and he's dancing to Metallica. Something which has never happened before on Strictly Come Dancing, which is, for context, a show with its roots in a ballroom show from the 1950s called Strictly Ballroom, which is considered primetime viewing in Britain. It goes on BBC One at 8 o'clock, and which indicates that this is television for everyone. This is for everyone from grandparents to children. This is family viewing, as broadly construed. And to see metal represented on here, again, is new. And this isn't the only TV show that is the case. And to that end, I have another TV segment that I would like to show you. Here is... hold on, let me go away. Here is...
And we went to
Gardener's
Berkshire
World
to see a man about his cacti.
Now, the quality is absolutely wrecking it. Let's sort that out as best I can. And if this sucks, I'm really sorry. I decided to not sort my router out properly before trying this. I thought, what the hell? You know, it'll be fine. And then I had the bright idea to start putting video up, and now it hates me. It doesn't ever want to do this again. I should probably stop. And yet, here we are in the immediate future. I'm refusing to stop. Maybe we'll come back to that. Well. I mean, I'll give a minute to just kind of let this video load. Maybe it will shit itself. Who knows? If anyone has any thoughts that they'd like to introduce right now, God, that would be helpful, because I'm trying to pad a broadcast here. Oh, fuck it. Right, back to the video. We're not doing this. I can't be bothered. Basically, there's an episode of Gardener's World which has... Hold on. Yep. There's an episode of Gardener's World which has a metal musician. He's got massive dreadlocks. He has 1,000 cacti, and he drives bands around. That's one of his jobs. He drives bands around, and he is a sound engineer. And he loves metal, and Gardener's World is one of the most unmetal shows I can possibly think of in the British broadcasting schedule, out of any channel. It's a show about gardening. It is very, very tame in its tone. It is very quiet normally. The soundtrack is normally very light, and it's hosted by a nice guy called Monty Don, who's terribly posh. Now, the Gardener's World segment I thought is very interesting, and I'm sorry that I fucked this up and I'm not going to be able to present it properly to you, but the beginning of the segment uses a sort of bow chicka wow wow type blues rock-ish hard rock, blues rock-ish kind of background music. But across the 7 minutes, the music gradually gets heavier and heavier until the final piece of music is like a sort of symphonic or Death Doom type sound, where you kind of got quite slow, but you've got double kick, you've got big chugging guitars, and you've got a big kind of echoey, slightly spacious production, and it sounds like it's extreme metal, you know? And it's like the segment, the producer of the segment felt the need to sort of gradually introduce metal to its audience through gradually increasing the heaviness of the music as they went, while at the same time the segment is continually emphasizing how nice and down to earth our boy is, and how much his girlfriend is so proud of him for starting this cacti collection, and so on and so on. It's all very, very sweet. Now, here's the stuff that I'm really into. The merchandising of metal has absolutely, well, diversified doesn't cover it, basically. Here is a tie-in between the makeup brand Elf and the death metal sparkling water brand Liquid Death. Now, Liquid Death, I could do a talk just about this company, and maybe I will another time, because this company is fucking crazy in terms of the way they have kind of cannibalized metal aesthetics in service of a major brand. Is really interesting. And they, I think, directly participate in the normalisation of metal in several ways. And I think you can really see this in their tie-in commercial they did with Elf a couple of years back, which featured a fictional famous black metal musician emerging out of the pages of a magazine to help teenage girls do their makeup. In corpse paint, of course. Liquid Death, obviously, with its tagline, "Murder Your Thirst," we've got enough evidence there to begin with. They've done all kinds of stupid gimmickry and tie-ins, and I say maybe I'll come back to that another day. This one down the bottom, which I will move slightly so I can show you, this is taken from an advert campaign that was made by the British bank NatWest, who have a small business account subsidiary called Mettle, METTLE, as in what's your metal, what's your capacities to tolerate things. Interesting, another interesting slippage, if you like, between the words metal in terms of the meaning of the word metal. And this grab business by the horns, god awful, seriously, was part of a ad campaign they did for metal, which were the centerpiece of which was a video which is a parody of the music video for Duality by Slipknot, but it's about a hairdresser who's getting clients. And to this end, I want to point out this quote from Nathan Explosion from Metalocalypse. And I'll do piece to camera for this because this is how important this is. Nathan says, "We are here to make coffee metal. We will make everything metal." This came out in 2006. This is the first episode of Metalocalypse. And what happens in this first episode is Death Clock make a coffee commercial. They make an advert that ends up deliberately killing thousands of people because they pour a giant cup of boiling coffee onto the crowd at this concert, and they kill everyone. It fucking rocks. They kill so many people. And then Nathan gets up and says, "We will make everything metal. Blacker than the blackest black times infinity," he says. And I cannot help but read this 20 years down the line as prophetic. That what Brennan Small, the creator of Metalocalypse, is articulating in that moment is this is what metal is in late capitalism. There is no end to metal's commodification. It will go on in all kinds of ways forever and ever. Every commodity can become metallized, everything, because metal as a series of aesthetics under capitalism knows no bounds. It can be anything that you want it to, and it doesn't matter what that is from the perspective of the producer. And that sometimes creates very interesting results. You get odd juxtapositions. I've already told of the small business banking account, but maybe you could say, maybe metal is kind of about small business because, you know, being in a band is kind of like being in a small business, you know, a small business where you largely lose money, but it has a lot of the trappings of a small business. You know, you do independent work, you manage your own schedule, you have a van a lot of the time, maybe you make your own stuff and sell it, maybe you go up and down the country doing little jobs for people and sleeping on the floor and eating pasties and going home. A lot of this has the trappings, the feeling of small business activity. I've thought perhaps maybe it's like being a tradie or something, like a builder, and there's a kind of fantasy there. But so maybe let's say we could excuse it and say, okay, fine, the small business account being made metal, that's okay, and the makeup, I mean, we don't even need to explain that, you know, like makeup is how you have corpse paint. So that is, although we have the tie-in with a brand and it's all pink and it's supposedly parodically aimed at teenage girls. I believe this may have been an April Fool's. You could still excuse it away and be like, yeah, but it's necessary to cultural production. But then it gets worse because there's all this other stuff. There's all this other shit. And so you get things like, this is a Behemoth tea set, or maybe you'd like a Papa Roach pizza cutter based off of their famous song Last Resort, Cut My Life into Pizzas. Maybe you'd like a Manowar a doormat, something which I noticed is no longer being sold. I kept trying to find this after I made the presentation, and the Manowar doormat I can only find as a sort of remnant on their web store. Like they don't display the page anymore, they don't sell it, but you can still find like sort of traces of the URL or some stuff. Or maybe you'd like a vegan corpse paint face mask. Cute, nice. But I think the worst offender truly is the Rob Halford Funko Pop. I can only perceive Funko Pops as an appalling waste of resources. So this is really, really heinous in my opinion. But this is just to kind of illustrate the wild extent to which metal is now commodified or has been transformed into various kinds of commodity. And this shows very clearly how truly we will make everything metal. And the consequences of making everything metal are to kind of undermine the importance of metal's signifiers, the aesthetics, the face of death that is being represented by corpse paints, or the sadomasochistic gear that Rob Halford wears is now turned into a little kid's toy. Not even a kid's toy, sorry, collectible. You know what they like being called. You know what they are. So you take these, or Cut My Life into Pieces. Well, Last Resort is a song about suicide. You know, it's a song about killing yourself and debating whether to do it or not. I'm not going to say that I love Papa Roach, but like I know what Last Resort is about. I've even danced to it while watching it live before once in my life. Probably not going to be doing it again. But it is there. Even a song about suicide can be reduced to literally a pizza cutter. And this is the effect of making everything metal, is to kind of is to participate in a normalisation process, which is happening to lots and lots of things, right? Like loads of cultures are being made more socially acceptable, but it just so happens that the things that metal is bound to aesthetically are these most taboo and most kind of shocking or morbid or violent signifiers. And so you end up with very odd effects. You also end up with interesting shifts in what metal is as music. So here are 5 famous contemporary metal acts, or acts that incorporate metal, who all have kind of branched away from true metal aesthetics and into mainstream pop. Some of them, like Sleep Token or Poppy, are concerned with taking metal and kind of binding it to established pop forms. Poppy uses sort of girl pop and seems to be especially influenced by Lady Gaga, another pop star who clearly enjoys metal a lot. And Sleep Token took the sort of very closely mic'd depressive R&B from the mid to late 2010s and put djent in it so it sounds really big at certain points in the songs. Baby metal mix sort of kawaii aesthetics with metal songwriting. Ghost sort of married metal visual aesthetics to sort of more hard rock writing, and Ghost Domain is a trap metal singer, combining trap with metal samples and screaming and stuff. And all of these artists, all of these innovations serve to indicate how metal is more available as a set of sonic signifiers to pop musicians. The metal is now more readily incorporated into pop music compared to the way it was 20 years ago, where you could have things which kind of alluded to metal or rock, but in chart pop, but they wouldn't make it into the works of chart pop musicians. Whereas now they do. Poppy and Sleep Token have actually done well as kind of pop in their own right. And it also just shows how extreme metal signifiers are available for different pop genres. Like hip hop and extreme metal are much closer now than they were 20 years ago. There's been a big blurring of genre boundaries, which is in some ways is great because it indicates the value of metal's music to other musicians. It confirms its legitimacy in a sense. But it also shows how metal is readily available, has become normalised as a series of signifiers that can be transformed. So, for instance, baby metal can have a song which is pretty damn heavy, but is about chocolate. Fine. That is available now. Obviously, there were parody bands and comedy bands before, but they weren't successful like baby metal was. Like baby metal has been, you know. And indeed, as I kind of mentioned it before, here's another way in which we can talk about metal becoming more legitimate, is precisely through the work of the conferences, the academics, the scholars meeting up and talking about metal is itself all part of the process. Now, the thing is, metal, some of this is obvious, right? As metal ages and we get old metal fans coming into the mix, and as you have things like Grindmother, you have older people participating in metal. Part of this, we might say, this normalisation of metal makes sense because as people get older, they tend to sort of shave their corners off and gradually taboos lose their meaning as cultures age. This is well known. But I want to argue that there are kind of two kinds of transgression at play here. Maybe we can pick those apart because while we had a sort of a more normalised metal, people still seem to be into the transgressions. it's not like the appeal has completely gone for everybody. People still perceive metal as transgressive, even though I can point out empirically how it's not as transgressive as it used to be. You know, I can go through all of these examples again, but obviously you don't want that. But suffice to say, there is evidence to show that metal's not as transgressive as it may have been in the 90s or 80s. But how is this maintained? I want to argue that there are two kinds of transgression to consider here. The first relies on I call it a kind of nostalgic transgression, or even an unconstructed transgression. And here's Rob Halford about to break the law. He's about to do the coolest thing possible, basically, which is he's about to break into a bank vault to steal a copy of his own album. I fucking love this section of the Breaking the Law video because it's so silly. It makes no sense at all. And it kind of really emphasises what the first kind of transgression is, which is a kind of fantasized transgression, perhaps, a rebellion which is more in our dreamland, or perhaps is merely aesthetics, is not so bound up with politics, perhaps. A traditional transgression, a simpler view of transgression where metal rebels against a cultural mainstream. There's a simple us versus them, outsider versus mainstream division. And this form of transgression in our time looks sort of tame, or even, as I say, nostalgic, like a throwback. And I want to argue that that's because